Hi everyone, I'm Lauren, your sewing buddy, and welcome back to my historical Halloween project. Today I'm doing painting, which is why I'm busting out the lint roller and getting all the little cat hairs and loose threads off of the front, because there's nothing worse than having that stuck in your paint, making it look weird. Not that this project doesn't already look weird. Um, so yeah, let's get started. I just need to mark out first where I'm actually putting my lettering. The words are stop, go. So 4 across the top, 2 at the bottom. So the first thing I want to do is find the center point, which I'm eyeballing the horizontal center point, but then finding the vertical center point so that I make sure I have even spacing. I'm using my Daiso washable fabric marker, but that's not showing up on the black. So we're going to go back to the classic tailor's chalk. So I have a 10-inch bodice, and I'm going to mark the 5-inch point, and then I think I'm going to do the letters about 2 inches wide. Um, so this will be the T. And then I'm actually going to space out 1/2 inch on either side of that center mark because I do want space between the words. Not too much because there's not that much room, but some amount of space. So I'm going to remark that T a little bit higher here. And then the S. These are the bottoms of the letters, so I'll build from there. And then same thing on the other side, O and P. And then for the bottoms, same thing once again. Just mark out every 2 inches, figure out about how long I want them, make sure that they're equidistant from those center marks so that I don't have weird missized lettering either. I'm just drawing out boxes here that will contain the letters. And then along the top, I realized I can use the line from my fell stitching to keep things pretty well even, because that was a fairly straight line. So now I've got my 4 boxes top, 2 on the bottom. Let's get to painting. I'm just using a standard matte white fabric paint here. Give it a good shake always before you begin. Make sure you're in a roughly comfortable position, and also double check to make sure that everything here is in frame. And then realize that you haven't used this in a while and there's a little plug of dried paint keeping the new paint from coming through. Once that's been extracted, squeeze out just a little bit of paint. It does dry pretty quickly, so I don't want to have too much in the bowl at a time. And I'm just using a Japanese style teacup for this, which works actually very well. So get that cat hair off your paintbrush. If you're doing a block letter S, the trick is to actually start with the outside curves. So starting with the outside of the top curve here until my paint runs out, and then going in to do the outside of the bottom curve. And then you just fill in the lines in between and try to keep everything equal distance. And I'm not going exactly all the way to the edge of the box because I don't want the letters to run into each other. So leaving a little bit of space there. And tracing the outline first so that I make sure I have a good frame to work within for the full paint. I'm also doing a very, very light coat for this one. This is sort of like the primer coat, so I do want to make sure it gets into all the crevices of the weave of the fabric, but I'm not worried about absolute full coverage for this time around. And then just fill it all in once I have it traced out, and enjoy some music while I work. So by this point, I've almost got the second coat done. Um, Again, this one is a little bit heavier than the first, but I just want that really vibrant white with good sharp edges. So you might think, oh, but the first coat wasn't dry yet, but it pretty much was. Like, that's how light I went with it. So this one, I'm definitely making sure I get as much fill as I possibly can. And, that way, if I'm out directing traffic, which I never do, I can be very visible with my conflicting directional signs as the authentic costume directed. Um, a couple of notes on the dress itself. The waist is a little bit big. Honestly, the whole bodice turned out to be a little bit big, but comfortably big, not like ridiculously big. Just, not as flattering as it would be if it were fully fitted. But good enough for my needs, my purposes, close enough for jazz, as they say. And I did get a tiny spot of white on the bodice there, but that's okay. We're just going to move on to the hat. So one option I have for the hat is this thick black interfacing, which my head is 22 inches around where I want the hat to sit. And I should have that amount if I sew this little end piece on here. So that's one option I'm thinking of. I just want to double check that I do actually have enough to make that happen. And I do. But the other option I was looking at is this synthetic horsehair braid. I was thinking maybe if I wrap that like spiral around itself for a little bit and sew that together, that's gonna be too flimsy for what I want. So scrap that, we're going with the interfacing. I've got that all sewn together now, nice little zigzag stitch. So we will get this drawn out and cut out. I'm working on half of the material because it's easier to get it symmetrical that way. I'm just going to rough out a curved bottom. Because the hat has a little bit of a taper to it, I have to have the bottom edge curved, otherwise it's not going to have the right shape. Common failing in all of your elementary school princess construction paper hats. So I want to draw out roughly where the circles are going to be for the red, yellow, green quote-unquote lights. That way I know how tall I want the hat to be. And sketch out that tapered edge. And then the top edge is going to follow the same curve as the bottom edge. That way that should also be a nice flat circle. Alright, then fold it in half and we are ready to cut, as long as I actually get it folded in half and not some horrible butchering of what half is. You can see the material is kind of sliding as I cut, so it's not perfect, but it's my first hat, so if it turns out to be actually a hat, I'll be happy. So I got the top and bottom cut out now, and I just need to get that side. Make sure that I get the angle. And there we go. So I'm going to fold it out against where it's folded before, and I want more taper to it. So I'm going to fold it back in half. Just double check that I actually need more. Yeah. And then I'm just going to cut this at a sharper angle. And that should do it. Perfect, yes. So then to get that to stay together, what I've done is a little dirty zigzag or sideways zigzag, basically using the front back stitch and forward stitch on my machine going at a slight angle across. I'm going to fill in the middle with glue gun because the arm of my machine is just not that long. My hot glue gun is a low temperature and kind of fussy. It leaks a lot, which is why I have my cutting mat here for it to leak onto. And I just want to make sure I get a good enough seal here that it's not going to pop open. Originally I thought that I would cover this, but I just don't have the material to do that, so I'm lucky this part is black. So we got that all pressed together. Get it nice and firmly pressed because I don't want this popping open. It's not the end of the world if it does, it's just I feel better about it if it doesn't. Okay. And that is going to hold. Nice. And then you can see the actual shape of the hat here. Next I just need to figure out the circle and the brim, which is going to go outside this wider bit. And that's going to take a little bit of math for the brim. So the circumference of the base of the hat right now is 23.5 inches. And circumference equals pi times d. And then that means I want 23 and a half. Yeah, 23 and a half over d would equal pi. Right? Is that right? No, wait. What I actually want is 23 and a half over pi equals d, because d is what I'm trying to find. That's the diameter of the circle. And I am going to have to do the brim in two parts. And the equation works out to 7.5, so each half is going to have to be 3 3/4, but then I need a little bit for a seam, so 4 1/4. And I found my center point there, and I'm going to measure 3 3/4 out to either side from that, because because of that seam, it's not going to be a perfect circle. But it's going to be perfect once it's all sewn together, I hope. So I got those marked out, and I can't just measure out from the center because it's all going to be different. So I'm going to roughly draw out the rest of the circle, which you can probably already see I did not get quite perfect. Unfortunately, past Lauren did not realize this, so this is going to cause some fun in the future. But just measuring in 1/2 inch now all the way around so that I can create tabs. Those are going to be glued to the inside of the hat. So it's going to be something like that when it's all done and cut out, but I'm not doing that yet. I'm just going to draw out this little circle along the inside to get all of that so that we have something that can grip onto the hat. And then once I get that drawn in, which is much easier because I actually have a guide for this circle, even though it's not a good half circle, I need to figure out how much of a brim I can have based on the material. And that's about 2.5 inches. I like to measure from the one on my measuring tape because the very edge is a little bit lopsided, so I never trust it. But now I'm just measuring 2.5 inches out from that line. Make sure that everything is nice and equidistant. And kind of using the line on the one to make sure everything is tangential to the inner circles. So now with that all traced out, it's time to cut. And then I can do the other half and put it together. Here's the biggest error I made, though, is assuming that if I folded on the center marks that I made, then I would have a nice perfect circle. But I cut from that edge that was lopsided, so it didn't quite turn out that way. Spoilers, I guess. But there's my 1/2 circle, and then trying to convince myself that it's going to fit on the inside of this hat, which of course it's not going to do because it's not the measurements that I had worked out. But you know what, that's okay. I can use the fabric for the tabs instead and just use the interfacing as interfacing because I don't have the material to actually cut out 3 of these. I can only get these 2. So, okay. All I need to do is trace this out, and this is me realizing exactly how off my 2 halves were. Momentary panic, but I'm not going to give up on this. Let's go. So I'm just going to trace this out quickly because, yeah, I definitely do not have enough to do a 3rd one of these. And then once this is all traced out, I can easily cut it. And then say some prayers to whatever creativity gods there are that this will still turn out okay. Because at this point, I was not sure. Again, I've never made a hat before. I've seen crafty hats made. I realize this is a very Holly Homemaker way to do this, and you can see they're still not perfectly cut out. But I do at least have these 2 half circles that I can use for the top of the hat, I hope. Yes, plenty of room. Okay, so I can sew those together, sew the 2 bits of the brim together, and then work on the fabric coverings. So on here, I'm just going to trace out the size of the, if I can find my pen, the size of the actual top of the hat. This was a total waste of time because I'm going to be covering both sides with fabric, but you know what? It made sense to Lauren right here. So that, okay, go. Just gonna darken that in for absolutely no reason. And then I'm going to trim the threads, show you once again these tabs that I'm going to cut that are going to stick inside of the hat itself. And then for the brim, it's not perfect. It's going to sit weird, and I just have to live with that. So I have that messed up piece from the bodice, which is actually big enough to cut 2 of the circles, so small blessings there. And the reason I'm doing 2 is because I don't want the white on the inside either. I want just, black inside and outside. And I don't know why I was about to cut with my crafty scissors when I have my nice black shears right here, but that was a choice I luckily did not make, because that would be a lot more bothersome than cutting with my nice buttery black shears. So now with that all cut out, I realize the extra work I made for myself. It would have been much easier at this point to just put the hat on top of here and trace it out. But instead I decided I need to press a nail into the line and make a mark all the way around to indicate my sew line, because I want my stitching to be right around the very top of the hat. So just fill that in nice and dark because I don't want this rubbing off. And then the interfacing is going to go between those 2 layers. And I will get those sewn together in a moment. First, I need to figure out this hat brim. Luckily, I have, not that, enough linen left over from the facing and the sleeves. So I'm going to use that to get my hat brim put together. And this was when I had an aha moment that I have a cutting board right here that will make a much better drawing surface. But now you're about to see me struggle with getting this thing to lay flat enough to get traced out. I'm drawing toward the inside because, again, I'm going to have tabs that will be cut out. But I did not leave myself enough for seam allowance on the outside. So luckily fabric has two sides. So I'm just going to trace again the inside and outside seam allowances. I mean, the inside's not, I guess it is technically a seam allowance because I'm going to cut those tabs and use those to glue it to the inside of the hat. So now make sure that your bottom edges are matched up. You don't have any extra fabric folded anywhere. And then get that cut out. Just a giant black donut of doom. Though honestly, put together, it's kind of a cute beret. I'm not making the same mistake again. I'm just making an opening for my scissors to go in because I did not want to have a seam going out to the edge of the hat brim. This makes it a lot easier to deal with. Okay, so then I just need to actually draw in my seam lines, which, okay, let's try that again because that went right up to the edge. Once again, the fabric has two sides. So just trace that. God damn it, same thing again. So take a breath, try again, be a little more gentle. There you go. You got it done. And then I'm going to go over it with blue just because that way I know which line I'm supposed to be following. So yay, that's all done with. And then I got that sewn together and clipped, and I made some nice black confetti. You've got population tire right here. So now I just need to turn that right side out. No, I'm not bothering pressing it because I'm already fed up with this hat and I just want to get it done. So I'm going to tuck the interfacing inside of the brim casing that I've made here. It's going to fight me every step of the way because that's what this hat has done. But I am still working on it because I'm not giving up. No hat shall defeat me. But for some reason, the interfacing now is a little bit too big for the casing. So if I can finagle it to fit flat, I will, but it's not wanting to. But I found a place where it's trying to fold over itself a little bit. So what I'm actually going to do is cut that so it can just fold over itself. Just want to make sure I'm not cutting the actual material and only cutting the interfacing. Made a little snip, but that's not quite enough. Just go pretty much all the way through. There we go. Good enough. And yes, I can actually cover the entire hole with the hat, which means I'll have enough room to cut the tabs. Then that goes on top. But not quite yet. So what we're going to do next is... What am I doing here? Right, I need to make a seam line for the inner part so that I know how deep to cut the tabs. So I just need to find my chalk and make sure this is vaguely centered and trace out the bottom of the hat. And then that's where I'm going to sew. And now it's time to make more confetti, cutting the tabs for the top of the hat. And there is a little bit here where you can see the fabric has folded over, but that's okay. That can be the inside of the hat. And this is also a good time to warm up your hot glue gun, because that's how we're attaching this. I mean, I would love to have a really nice haberdasher's machine. I know those exist where it's like all weird long arms and thin openings and, you know, basically designed for this, but that's not in my budget, so this is what we get. Also, once again, it's Halloween, so if it looks a little bit crafty, I don't mind. So now I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the outside of a tab and tuck it in there and just work my way around getting those tabs tucked in, and then decide that this whole thing is fighting me because it would have been a lot easier if I'd actually busted out my ironing board and, you know, flat or angled these tabs in so that they would want to sit properly. Instead, what I'm going to do is work my way all the way around, just tucking them in for right now, and then somehow the circle is larger than the top of the hat, because that's my luck with this project so far. So what I need to do is actually cut a couple of those tabs a little bit deeper, and fight with this a little bit. Crafting life. Okay, let's see if that helped at all. Not really, no. So I'm just gonna wrestle with this off screen because look, it's magically all done. And it's not beautiful, but I have some trim I think that I can put around the top of that to make it decent. And I've gone around and clipped the hat brim. I'm going to put the marked up side facing down so that it doesn't show as much. And then these all just need to get glued into the hat, which should be much, much easier. And I'm also going to start with one on one side and one on the opposing side, but I actually need to glue the lining fabric, I guess you would call it, into the inside as well, because the two are not attached, and so they just kind of live as little floaty bits. The tricky part with this is actually getting enough of an angle to press in without feeling like I'm crumpling the brim. But yeah, just working my way around. This is a very good reason why I'm using my low temperature heat gun, because there's a lot of contact, and I did kind of scald my fingers a little bit here, but that's tradition. You can already see the little droplets collecting on my cutting board or cutting mat, because this, I think I got this hot glue gun for my very, very first costume college, so many, many years ago. And it's not an expensive model, so yeah, it's seen some stuff. But by having those anchor points, so I did 4 that were equidistant around the hat approximately. That way I'm more sure to get a close to perfect fit around. Again, this hat brim turned out weird, so it's not perfect, but nothing is perfect. Honestly, I think that the kind of squiggly brim adds to more of a Halloween feel to it. Almost like Tim Burton creates the traffic signals dress, but I can't even claim that because it's just so artsy craftsy. But again, that's okay because that's what vintage Halloween was all about. It was those homemade costumes, the paper mache, the mom sewed this, I painted this. You know, that was the fun of it. But hey, we're in the home stretch now for these tabs. Once the tabs are done, I just need to get those circles for the red, yellow, green, quote unquote, lights, and then that little bit of trim around the top I was talking about, and this will be done. I'm actually impressed with how few spider webs I'm getting from the hot glue gun here. I mean, there are some, but it's not the worst. Hat fits, so let's get on with our circles. So I do have enough of this white interfacing left to take care of this. And these are going to go right up. Let's see which side is best. I'll figure it out. But yeah, so I've got this cute little jar. Always have empty jars around for just such an occasion. It happens to be a pretty good size for the size of circle that I want. So I'm just going to trace that around. I only need 3 of these, so that's not terrible. I'm also really happy to finally be able to use these materials because I've been hanging on to them for years and years. But still, no need to be wasteful. I can fit my 3rd circle in right here. And then with all of those traced out, it is time to cut. And again, I'm using my craft scissors because this is thicker than normal fabrics. I'm actually not sure if this is a fusible or a sew-in interfacing at this point. But for safety's sake, I'm treating it as a sew-in because, you know, it's just more stable that way. And honestly, I'm hot gluing it anyway, so who honestly cares? I've got those done. Now let's get some of our fabric scraps from making the skirt. Going to start with, once I can actually dig it out of here, yellow. So this was part of the angle cut from that skirt. There's no need to cut from the very middle of the fabric, Lauren. And I'm moving back to my washable Daiso fabric marker here just because it's, I trust it more than a pen on here. I don't want black to come shining through. I'm tracing out a rough sort of seam line or seam allowance there because it does need to fold over the back so I can glue it. So then with that cut out, that's gonna go with this circle. Set that aside. Once again, remember, I have a cutting mat. Also, I'm going to need a hot glue gun once I get all 3 of these done. What I'm trying to find are the little bits that are separate from the main yardage of the fabric. So trace out the green, making sure I have enough room for that seam allowance. And the blue marker didn't show up quite as well on the green as, you know, we learned before, but it's enough for me to see where I need to cut, and that's really all that matters. So those can wait. Now I just need my red. And because the marker wouldn't show up very well on red at all, I'm going back to my pink Taylor's chalk, which I need to order more of because I think that chalk is actually from my grandmother. So it would be nice to have some new Taylor's chalk. But now I can start gluing these in place. So I'm putting a light coat and spreading it out because if I did just like a squiggle or a spiral or whatever, then that would show through easily. The fabric would pucker around it. So instead, I'm laying some out and then using the head of the glue gun to spread it so that it's more of a flat surface that's just attaching. And I don't need this to be a super durable attachment. This is really just to hold it in place so that when I fold it over, it stays put. And this is the last one here. Like, I don't even need it to go all the way to the edge because it's seriously just a stabilizer. But that's all 3 now, and then I just need to make some more confetti because everyone loves confetti. I'm going to fold these all in individually here. Just a little bit of glue. Doesn't take a lot for this. Like, don't overload your material with glue. But also maybe cut all of your tabs and then start gluing. Just, I don't know, Lauren, that seems like something a sane person might do. But then no one's ever accused you of being sane, I guess. But hey, look, we've got all 3 circles done. Now we just need to attach them to the hat. figure out which angle of the hat is going to be best for that. Get a fresh stick for the glue gun. And here I am going as close to the edge as possible and doing a good amount in the middle because I want these to stay put. I just want to give it a good solid press. Try to flatten out the surface of the hat that they're being attached to as much as possible. And for the yellow, a little bit above the green, just, give it a really solid press down because I don't want the edges peeling up. If the edges peel up, then it looks even more artsy-craftsy. I realize my red circle is not the greatest, but it gets the point across. And there we go. Now, this is the trim that I was talking about. I picked it up in the marketplace at Costume College. I have tons of it, so I'm just going to apply that around the top to hide whatever that is. Just a little bit of glue to lock this down. And then just trace that all the way around. Doing my best not to get any hot glue where it doesn't need to be because those smears and spider webs are part of what makes an artsy-craftsy project look artsy-craftsy. I'm basically putting that glue right along the top edge of the interfacing because that's where I want this to adhere to. It might have been good to apply the same trim around the bottom of, or I guess around the edge of the brim, the bottom of the hat. You know what I mean. But honestly, at this point, I could not be bothered. This is technically a hat, and that's all I need it to be. I have learned things in case I need to do a project like this again, but I would like to not be a haberdasher. With that said, I'd like to invite you to tune in tomorrow for the special Halloween Get Ready With Me reveal video, where you'll get to see this whole project put together. And as always, please like, comment, share, subscribe. Let me know what you're working on. Show me well, I guess you can't really show me your Halloween, but tell me about your Halloween costumes, and I will see you tomorrow.